Okay, so just recapping a little bit of what we talked about in class today with William Penn. But as I said, Penn was born in England to an Anglican family. His father was an admiral. At the age of 22, he joined the Quakers, which would have been kind of a radical break with his family in that, again, his family were high Anglicans, well-known Anglican family. His father was an admiral, and yet he chooses to join a group that dissents from the Anglican Church and that is also very much anti-war. Penn is jailed for his beliefs in doing so, and in 1677 he's granted land west of West New Jersey to become a settlement. William Penn undertook the task of creating a charter for his colony. That charter guaranteed, see if you see some familiarities with what we talk about today, trial by jury, so guaranteeing that people would be tried by a jury of their peers, guaranteeing that people would have freedom of religion. Remember, for the Quakers, it's important that they have their religious expression. They're a minority group, so they're going to guarantee that all religions have that freedom of religion. Another key guarantee is freedom from unjust imprisonment, that you cannot just be thrown in jail for arbitrary reasons, that there has to be a reason for the jail. And free elections. Now, I mean that everybody could vote, but that it was much more open and accepting for people to do so. And as we talked about a little bit at the end of the period, how they get the land. Charles II owned a large sum of money to William Penn's father, and Charles settles it by giving the land to William Penn himself. And William goes and calls the land Sylvania, meaning Latin for woods. So Sylvania is the word Latin, so he's calling it woods because it's a very wooded area in where it was today Pennsylvania. So William is going to call that. Charles II adds Penn's name to it, which Penn did not want. So William Penn did not want to have his name associated with the colony. It's the king that does it, so it becomes Pennsylvania, meaning Penn's woods. Now, what's unusual about this colony is that William Penn undertakes a great deal of advertising for the colony. Penn is going to be a master of using advertising and marketing to get people to want to migrate to Pennsylvania. He has pamphlets made up in multiple languages, in English, in Dutch, in German, and French, because again, this is going to be a colony that's going to accept people from all backgrounds, and he's really looking at building it in a way that is going to be an ideal colony. And so he's soliciting people with a wide variety of backgrounds. He needs people who can build things. So he needs carpenters, he needs brickmakers or masons, he needs shoemakers, he needs people that are going to be able to create a commercial colony. So that's going to be Pennsylvania's contribution to this, along with some other things, but it's going to be really a working class, a working colony is what Penn's dream is. He's working with groups of different ethnic backgrounds, with the English, the Dutch, the Swedish, the Welsh, who are already in the area. Remember, Pennsylvania is kind of on that fringe. It's between New England, which had the Swedes and the Dutch come in with New York, and it's between and above the English in the Chesapeake region in Virginia and Maryland. So he's got a wide variety of groups. So he names his main city Philadelphia, which many of you probably know means the city of brotherly love. That's what it translates from Latin. And he begins a planned development of the city. He undertakes to create a well-structured, orderly city to build for his colony. Another thing that differentiates Penn from the other colonists at the time is that Penn is going to give Native Americans fair market value for their land. He does not seek to just, get, an island for what was trinkets or $24 in trinkets today. He is going to assess it and say, if this is how much an English person would pay for this land, this is how much we will give Native Americans. That creates a great bond between the Quakers and the Native Americans, in that the Quakers were able to move among the Native Americans living in the area unarmed, unbothered, and even hired Native Americans as babysitters, which is something that would not have happened in the other colonies. The other colonies would have looked at Native Americans with suspicion, with fear, with concern. They certainly would not have given their children over to their care, but Penn and the other Quakers treat the Native Americans with respect, treat them with fairness, and so are able to kind of live in that harmony. Now, of course, harmony can't last very long. And there's tensions that grow, and the tensions grow because of this group of people called the Scots-Irish. And we'll talk more about their differential later on. But Scots-Irish move into Pennsylvania, and they're not as tolerant of Native Americans. And so they're going to look for ways of making sure that life with Native Americans isn't all that easy, and that's going to test Native American patience with the settlers of Pennsylvania. We see this image here. This is William Penn selling goods to the Native Americans. So we can see that with the Native Americans represented here on the right-hand side of the painting, and the Quakers trading goods and fairly doing so as they're building their settlement there. So we see an encapsulation of William Penn negotiating with the Native Americans for land in what is today Pennsylvania. So I've mentioned a little bit of things that are making the colony different in terms of their characteristics from the other British North American colonies, but let's highlight some other ones. So they had an elected assembly that was chosen by landholders. So again, if you held land in the colony, you could vote for this assembly. They did not believe in a state-sponsored religion. So again, unlike the Chesapeake region, which sponsored the Anglican Church, and New England, which obviously sponsored the Puritans, Pennsylvania is not going to have any tax money going to the religion. One difference, again, they are going to be discriminatory in that Catholics and Jewish people cannot hold office, and they could not vote. And that was strictly imposed on them from England. So again, that suspicions of the Catholic faith coming to them in England, that's going to impose that on the colony, and just the overall dislike of Jewish people, that distrust of them, that prevents them from holding office or voting. Unlike other colonies, the death penalty could only be imposed in Pennsylvania for 2 crimes, and that was treason and murder. About 200 crimes are ways that you could be given the death penalty in England. So again, looking at that differential there, and most of those crimes came over to the New World with English laws in the colonies. So going from over 200 ways to be executed in England, you went down to 2 in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania made no provisions, no plans for military defense. They did not have a militia, they did not really have an army. They did not impose any restrictions on immigration. They allowed anybody to come in, and joining the colony was very easily. It was basically just moving and welcoming and being part of the community. Pennsylvania grows to have a strong dislike of slavery. When we get to the Revolutionary period, we're going to start to talk about how Pennsylvania is kind of one of the colonies in pushing abolition, the abolishment of slavery in what becomes the United States. They did, though, have strict rules on things like ungodly revelers, like plays, playing cards or playing dice or any kind of games, and as something we came across as excessive hilarity, whatever that means. But they did want to control some behaviors among the colonists who settled there. With the marketing, with the openness, with the accepting of all different groups of people, Pennsylvania grows very quickly because people like things that are tolerant. They are attracted to that. It's different than the other colonies, and they want to embrace it. So the colony was, again, founded in 1600. I have a date here of 1770, which I think is incorrect there. I'm sorry. It should be 1670, not 1770. I got to correct that. But 19 years after the founding, it's the 3rd largest colony in North America. They were only passed by Virginia and Massachusetts. So that goes to show you just how quickly it grew in that it should be 1700. I'm sorry, not 1770. It should be 1700. 1700, 19 years after the founding, the colony was the 3rd largest colony. There were problems with the colony, though. They had some incompetent governors, so some governors couldn't run the colony very well, so that could be problematic. There was arguments with colonists who wanted more control, who wanted more influence in the colony, and even Penn had issues. And in order to talk about how William Penn had issues, we have to go and jump back to England. And yes, we have to go back to England again. Because in 1685, Charles II, who granted Penn the land, he dies, and his brother, James II, ascends to the throne. James II we have already talked about because James II was the Duke of York, giving his name to New York. And James II is the brother of Charles II. and he's the son of Charles I. They're siblings. Remember Charles I in England, he was executed by Parliament. While Charles II had to flee, his brother James also had to flee. And where does James go? James fled to France during that period called the Interregnum. While he's in France, he's going to be exposed to the Catholic faith. That's going to cause problems for him as king. Because in either 1668 or 1669, we're still not even sure the exact date, James secretly converted to Catholicism, which, again, as the head of the Church of England, it's very difficult for you to renounce the Anglican faith, to renounce the Church of England, to go back to the Catholicism, which would have been the religion, obviously, before the Church of England. So that causes a big controversy in England. He allows Catholics to return to court. He allows them to become an active presence within his advisors, within the social groups there, which will cause dissension, which will cause problems among his leadership. In 1687, he creates a document that voids laws that are unfavorable to Catholics and to Protestant dissenters, so people who are non-Anglican. He is going to allow Catholics to openly practice their faith. He's going to allow Catholics to start to hold office and to vote. He's going to allow people like the Puritans, or not Puritan, to the Puritans to hold office and vote. That again makes leadership of the country very, 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 very unhappy. And by 1668, who is going to be grumping the loudest? Anglican bishops will protest because they're seeing their authority chipped away. And Queen Mary, his wife, gives birth to a son who is baptized Catholic. Now, what does that mean for the leadership? That means a Catholic dynasty is now going to be established. So when James II dies, his son will take the throne, and his son will be Catholic, and we're going to start to return the Catholic faith to England, which means that people are not excited about that. So if you're looking at the next monarch being Catholic, what do you need to do? You need to look for somebody who isn't Catholic to become king. And groups of leadership invite somebody by the name of William of Orange. William of Orange was married to Mary, who was Charles II's daughter and James II's niece, to come to England with an army. William of Orange is just basically a princeling in the Netherlands. Orange is part of the Netherlands. So he's sitting there going, well, I can be a princeling in the Netherlands or I can be king of England. Guess what he's going to do? He shows up in England on November 5th. With the claim to the throne because the leadership wants to give it to him. And the people rise up. James is allowed to flee to France. And James is replaced as king by William IV and Mary II. So again, Mary II here is James's niece. And William IV, who is from the Netherlands, is married to Mary, and they're able to take the throne of England as joint monarchs. And that takes place in 1689. And we call this event in English history the Glorious Revolution. So William and Mary take over and become joint monarchs of England in the Glorious Revolution. There's no blood that's shed in this period, unlike other revolutions that had happened in previous times. There's no great upheaval in English history. So jumping back to the colonies, William Penn was friendly with James II. So when James was deposed, poor Penn was again arrested for treason 3 times because again he's one of those dissenters that the restoration of William is going to want to prevent from happening. He spent time in a debtor's prison, meaning he couldn't pay his debts now, which is strange because he's got all this land that is in Pennsylvania, but that wasn't good enough. While he's dealing with all this, he suffers a stroke that partially paralyzed him, and Penn winds up dying a sorrowful man, never quite fulfilling his goal that he wanted to have and having the peace of being able to sell this colony. The experiment of Pennsylvania, though, was a sign of hope. A religious colony, a religiously tolerant colony in America is a sign of hope for the colony overall. Okay, let's talk a little about one of the sister colonies there, and that's New Jersey. In 1664, the Duke of York, who becomes James II, gives 2 proprietors, meaning 2 men, landowners, land east of Pennsylvania. This land attracts many New Englanders who are seeking farmland. Again, New England's rocky soil. They're not able to grow very much. This area, though, has good soil and can grow things, so they're going to attract people down there. And one area, the people sold West New Jersey to the Quakers, and this colony winds up, as we're going to see just momentarily here, once it's purchased further, the east part of the colony is bought by Quakers. The settlers, though, again, were New Englanders, so they brought more of the Anglican culture with them. And by 1702, New Jersey becomes a royal colony, and it's united under one. The east and western parts of the colony become one under New Jersey, and this is a Quaker meeting house, one of the first Quaker meeting houses that was in the colony there. Okay, so we're going to stop here. And tomorrow we'll pick up, we have a little bit with the last colony, Delaware, and then we'll talk about other pieces of English settlement. So enjoy the Ed Puzzle, and we'll see you tomorrow.